Tonight, after this video ends, I want you to do something simple. Not complicated, not expensive, not political, not religious. Just step outside. Go to your porch, your driveway, your backyard, your apartment parking lot, anywhere you can see a decent patch of sky, and look up. If you catch a slow-moving star sliding across the night, don't brush it off. Don't do that modern thing where we see something incredible and immediately downplay it so we can go back to scrolling, because that phrase, "oh, it's just a satellite," is one of the smoothest sedatives in the world. Not because satellites aren't real, they are real, but because the word just is doing a lot of work there. Just a satellite, just a camera, just GPS, just weather, just internet. And that just is how you get people to accept a system without ever asking who built it, who controls it, and what it can do when the rules change. Here's the truth nobody says plainly. Satellites aren't just objects, they're infrastructure, and infrastructure is power. It's not even about whether one satellite can zoom in on your face like a movie. That's the bait debate. That argument keeps you small, keeps you distracted, keeps you arguing over the wrong thing. Because the real power isn't watching one person. The real power is that modern life is now wired into invisible switches. Switches you don't own. Switches you can't inspect. Switches you can't vote out. Navigation, timing, communication, logistics, emergency systems, finance, maps, deliveries. The things you don't think about until they're gone. So tonight we're going to ask the question that makes people uncomfortable because it's too close to the truth. What kind of world gets built when your daily life depends on systems you don't control hovering above you? And I'm warning you right now, once you see this, you won't be able to unsee it. Because the sky isn't empty, it's occupied. And what's up there isn't just technology, it's leverage. Welcome back to Rock Solid TV. If you're new here, I don't do bedtime stories. I do flashlights in the basement, and this topic matters because satellites sit above politics, above borders, above local laws, your opinion, and above your ability to opt out. If a society becomes dependent on something, whoever controls that something has a steering wheel. So here's how we're doing this tonight. 1, we start with the public story and why it's too clean. 2, then we talk about the real anatomy of satellites, how they're controlled, and how they actually see. 3, then we hit the part most people miss. Satellites aren't just cameras. 4, then we get into GPS and timing, the invisible backbone you don't notice until it snaps. 5, then we examine policy history, including debates over overhead imagery and domestic targets. 6, and finally, we talk about the bigger moral and spiritual question. What happens when humans build an all-seeing system and call it safety? Now let me be clear, because I can already hear the comment section loading its weapons. This episode is not satellites are fake. Satellites are real. This episode is the public understanding of satellites is shallow, and in a world where information is power, shallow understanding is how you get led around like livestock with a digital bell. All right, let's get into it. Part 1, the public story and why it's too clean. Here's the public story. Satellites help you see storms coming, navigate with GPS, watch TV, use satellite internet, take pictures of Earth, and none of that is wrong. For example, NOAA's Joint Polar Satellite System provides global observations that NOAA literally calls a backbone for weather forecasting and severe weather preparation. So yes, satellites can be benevolent tools, but the problem is not that the public story is false. The problem is that the public story is incomplete. Because a satellite is not just floating there doing its thing. A satellite is part of a living system. It has sensors, power, computers, radios, and most importantly, it is controlled. There's a whole discipline called TT&C, telemetry, tracking, and command. Telemetry is the satellite reporting its condition back down. Tracking is confirming where it is and how it's moving. Command is how people on the ground tell it what to do. The European Space Agency describes TT&C as satellite status data, telemetry, tracking ranging to determine location, and uplinked commands to the satellite. Translation for normal humans. Satellites aren't autonomous little angels. They're remote-controlled platforms. So the first shift you need to make is this. Stop picturing a satellite as a thing. Start picturing it as a node in a network that includes ground stations, command links, data pipelines, processing facilities, and downstream users. Some civilian, some military, some corporate, some classified. And when you live under a network, you don't just live under hardware, you live under capability. Part 2, they can't see me, is the wrong argument. Satellites can't see people. Yes, they can. No, they can't. Yes, they can. It's the least intelligent debate possible because it assumes surveillance equals constant close-up zoom. Real surveillance is not a movie villain with a joystick. Real surveillance is pattern. But before we hit patterns, let's settle one thing. Commercial Earth imaging satellites exist, and they're powerful. For example, ESA's mission page for Worldview 3 describes it as a high-resolution commercial satellite sensor. And multiple commercial imagery providers commonly describe Worldview 3 as offering around 30 centimeter class panchromatic resolution in the commercial market. Now, does that mean they're reading the serial number on your toaster? No. And that's exactly my point. Because the real power is not zooming in on you. The real power is seeing places repeatedly, tracking change, flagging anomalies, and combining imagery with everything else. And the everything else is where the story gets spicy. Part 3, the part you're missing. Satellites are not just cameras. If you only think satellites take pictures, you are stuck in 1997. Satellites can carry many kinds of sensors. One big category is radar imaging. Synthetic aperture radar, SAR, can generate imagery night or day, and NASA explains it can do so regardless of weather conditions. ESA similarly notes SAR can provide day and night imagery, and that clouds, fog, and precipitation don't significantly affect microwaves. That means the sky's biggest privacy blanket, clouds, isn't always a privacy blanket. So now your mental model changes again. It's not just a camera in the sky. It can be optical imaging, radar imaging, environmental sensing, signal detection and geolocation, communications relay, navigation, and timing broadcasting, which means satellites can support weather forecasting, civilian, mapping and logistics, civilian, intelligence gathering, government, market products and analytics, corporate. And here's the key. These worlds overlap. Civilian systems often build on capabilities pioneered for military or intelligence purposes and then refined for commercial use. That's not paranoia. That's history. The National Reconnaissance Office released declassification material about the decision to develop the Kennen imaging satellite launched in 1976 and describes it as providing leaders with critical intelligence and paving the way toward modern reliance on imagery from space. So when someone tells you satellites are just for weather, they're telling you one slice of a whole pie. And they're hoping you don't ask what the rest of the pie tastes like. Part 4. Near real-time is the game changer. Old spy satellites used film that had to be returned to Earth. Then came a revolution, digital transmission. That's why the Kennen KH-11 era mattered historically. It represents the transition toward near real-time reconnaissance as a strategic capability. Let me translate what near real-time means in spiritual terms. It means the sky becomes a live feed. Not for everyone, not for you, but for those with access. And in a world where information arrives instantly, who sees first becomes who decides first. Part 5. GPS is not just directions, it's an invisible chain. Now we're going to talk about something most people never consider. GPS isn't just for getting to Walmart without taking the scenic route through regret. GPS is also timing. A lot of critical infrastructure uses precise time synchronization, and NIST has published work discussing concerns about dependency on GPS timing for US critical infrastructure systems. So if you're thinking satellites don't affect me, let me ask you a rude question. Do you use banking systems, cellular networks, the power grid, internet services, modern transportation logistics? Because if timing gets degraded, things get weird fast. And here's where it turns from convenience into control point. GPS and other positioning, navigation, timing systems are vulnerable to disruption. DHS has public materials about jamming threats and efforts to combat them. CISA materials discuss the need to address interference, jamming, and spoofing risks for GPS equipment used by critical infrastructure. So what do we learn? 1. Society depends on satellite timing and positioning. 2. Those signals can be disrupted or manipulated. 3. Therefore, whoever can affect those signals has leverage, and leverage is the real currency of power. So even if someone proves to you beyond any doubt that satellites can't read your shirt from orbit, it wouldn't matter, because satellites can still shape when systems work, where systems guide, what systems prioritize, and what systems deny. And denial is the sharpest form of control. Part 6, they don't need to watch you, is the scariest truth. Here's the twist that upgrades your brain. They don't need to watch you constantly, because modern surveillance is not mainly about watching. It's about indexing reality. It's about turning the world into searchable data. Think about what a system can do if it can. Capture repeated overhead imagery, detect changes in a location, correlate those changes with communications, this purchases, location histories, and social graphs, and then flag unusual behaviors. At that point, you don't have a camera, you have a filter, and you are living inside it. This is why the privacy debate is usually a trap, because people argue about the wrong thing. They argue about whether you're being watched like a celebrity, but the real question is, are you being modeled? Because if you're modeled, you can be predicted. If you can be predicted, you can be nudged. If you can be nudged, you can be managed. And the person being managed will swear they're free because nobody put handcuffs on their wrists. Meanwhile, the handcuffs are on the environment. Part 7, the policy history. They don't put in school. Now, I'm going to step carefully here because I'm not here to throw accusations like confetti. But we can talk about documented policy debates and historical records. The National Security Archive has a collection titled U.S. Reconnaissance Satellites, Domestic Targets, discussing policy debates around using U.S. reconnaissance satellites for imagery of targets in the United States. They also publish documents related to the domestic use of overhead imagery on civilian U.S. targets. What does that tell you? It tells you this wasn't a crazy idea somebody made up on a message board. It was a real policy question, debated seriously enough that there's a paper trail. And when there's a paper trail, the question becomes, if the debate existed then, what does it look like now in a world where imagery is more frequent, data is more integrated, and AI can process at scale? I'm not saying this is happening to you today in the way your imagination wants to dramatize it. I'm saying the capability exists, the temptation exists, and the history shows people have wrestled with it. And if you think power will always resist temptation, I have a bridge to sell you, and it comes with a toll booth. Part 8, the real reframe. So let's reframe the whole episode in one sentence. Satellites are not mainly about watching individuals. They are about shaping systems. They shape information, navigation, timing, logistics, visibility, and denial. And in the modern age, whoever shapes systems can shape society without ever passing a law. They don't need to knock your door down. They just need to make the doors you rely on stop opening. Part 9, the spiritual question. Now, let's bring it home. I'm not going to do the cartoon thing where everything is demonic satellites, but I am going to say something that a lot of people feel in their bones. There is something spiritually corrosive about a civilization building an all-seeing architecture and calling it progress. Because humans have always wanted the same 3 temptations. 1, to see what they shouldn't see. 2, to know what they shouldn't know. 3, to control what they shouldn't control. And technology doesn't create that desire. It amplifies it. It gives it teeth. So the real question isn't, are satellites evil? The question is, what kind of humans are using them and what kind of world are they building with that power? Part 10, what you can do. I'm not here to sell you go live in a cave, but I am here to tell you the truth. You can't fight systems you can't see. So step 1 is awareness. Then step 2 is resilience. Don't build your entire life on single points of failure. Don't treat convenience as a god. Don't assume it'll always work. And don't assume the people steering the machine love you, because history says they love power more. Satellites are real, but the public story is incomplete. They're not just pretty space hardware. They're not just weather helpers. They're not just directions on your phone. They're part of a global nervous system. And once a nervous system exists, the only question left is, Who's holding the brain? If you want part two, I'll do the full breakdown of the surveillance stack. Phones, data brokers, smart devices, location trails, and how it all funnels into behavioral control. If you're still watching right now, hit subscribe because you're one of the few people who actually wants the truth, even when it costs comfort. And as always, stay rock solid. And if you want to help support the channel, you can do so by clicking the link below and becoming a member. For more rock solid TV truth, check out the books available now by Rocky Smith, RSTV Sunday School for Adults. History, they don't teach in school. Bible, they don't preach in church. Rock solid Bible knowledge. Until next time, keep seeking truth, stand firm in faith, and remember, a man who understands the system cannot be easily enslaved by it. This is Rock Solid TV, uncensored history, unfiltered truth, unshakable faith.